In this video I want to get some shocks on here. So let's dive straight into a common sense approach for fitting shock absorbers on a custom air ride suspension. We look at the angle of the dangle and effectiveness and how to do the brackets and all the rest of it. Coming up. Hey, how's the jokes? Welcome back to my forest workshop. My name is Diff. This is Rat Rods for Africa, and today I want to fit some shock absorbers to the back end of my custom frame here. In the previous video I finally got it onto wheels and we got the air ride suspension to work front and back. So let's get into exploring what would be required to get some shock absorbers on here. So yes, all good and well to mount a shock here somewhere, but with my air ride setup there's a fair amount of travel. To just show you, this is when we are fully aired up, and then when we slam the truck, we go right down to that position. So my very first concern would be that we don't bottom the shock before we get to this position. That would be bad. It could even break the shock. So the first order of business would be to make sure to actually have enough travel in the shock. Let's explore that a little bit further. Let's have a look at this Monroe gas shock lying here on my table. If I measure the eye-to-eye distance in the fully extended position, the way it is at the moment, I get a distance of 600 millimeters, roughly 2 feet. So now never mind what the catalogs say, I want to establish my effective compressed length. And to do that I'm going to use my custom shock squasher. I built this tool exactly for that purpose quite some time ago. It's not complicated, it's just a piece of square tubing sliding inside another piece with these bits of angle bar welded on to hold the shock, which will go in like this. Got a length of threaded bar running down the middle with a nut on that side. And now as I wind it, it will start compressing the shock. Now yeah, it's quite slow. If I could have used a square thread on that threaded bar it would have been much quicker, but I didn't have that available. So we have to live with this. So I'm just going to wind it all the way until the shock is fully compressed. I think we're pretty close to the end now. It's turning quite easily, and when I start feeling some resistance I will stop turning and I want to break the shock, but I will feel when we're getting to the end which is right there. I can feel some resistance now. So my shock is fully compressed. Now I can measure my eye center to eye center distance, which is 370 millimeters. So my extended measurement was 600 millimeters, compressed was 370, so if I subtract the two from each other, my effective travel was 230 millimeters. This one is fully extended, this one is fully compressed, so this distance here, the difference, is the effective travel. Right, so now let's measure the travel of the back axle. I'm currently in the fully slammed position. The frame is lying on the ground, so we can't drop any lower. So I'm going to measure the distance between the top of the axle and this reference point across the top of the frame. And I am measuring 208 millimeters. So let's air it up and see what the next measurement will be. I think that's as high as it will ever go. I've got almost 100 psi into the bag, and the distance that I measure now is pretty much 400, maybe let's see, 402 millimeters. So let's remember those two distances. So I wrote those dimensions down next to my shock dimensions here on the bench. And the axle fully aired, I measured 402, fully slammed 208. That distance, which is the travel, is 194, and the shock is 230. So we've got about 36 millimeters in hand, if I can say it like that. I would like it to be a little bit more though. So this is a very good time to talk about the angle of the dangle. Do you want the shock to sit vertical, or can it be angled forward or angled aft? Are there any pros and cons to doing an angle? Why would you want to angle it? Heck, you could even angle it inboard and forward. So many different options. First things first, a shock is most effective when it's perpendicular to the axis of travel of the suspension. As you can see here on this wishbone, the shock sits completely vertical and the axis of travel is horizontal. Okay, I'm sure someone is going to mention caster angle. But who's to say that this shock tower is not perpendicular to the caster angle? Anyway, I'm sure you know what I mean. So in a perfect world, you'd also want to have the shock mounted to as close to the wheel as possible. Well, in this case, there's physical constraints, so it would not be possible to move it any closer. So here in the back, this would theoretically be the best position, but that's putting it pretty damn close to the wheel, and I'm going to have some problems here with my frame, so I don't think that's going to be very practical. I'm probably going to end up having to fit it here somewhere. Sometimes you got to make some compromises. So if we look at my setup from a sideways point of view, the axle is pretty much moving straight up and down. So the shock will be most effective when it sits vertical like this. Now yeah, if you do want to split bolles, the axle actually moves through an arc because of the link bars, but because my link bars are quite long, that change in the arc fore and aft is very little. And it's pretty much practically straight up and down. But now I do want to angle it forward a little bit for a particular reason. So let's have a look at the pros and cons of doing that. So to make the design and configuration and understanding of this whole shock business and the application a little bit easier down the line, I've created these sticks. So this one is the same distance center to center of my extended shock. And then I've got another one that is the same distance as my compressed shock. So yes, those of you who know me well will know that I like to play with bits of wood when it comes to this stuff. Just makes it easier to understand. So now that I've got these two sticks to represent my two shock lengths, let's go to the forest engineering design office and explore things a little bit further. A piece of plywood on the floor, some wooden sticks, a little bit of common sense, and we are entering the realm of forest engineering. PAD system. If you don't know, PAD is the abbreviation for plywood assisted design. So I've marked a vertical line here, which we've seen is the most effective mounting position for my particular application. Now this stick represents the extended shock length. So I've marked those positions here and here. And then this stick represents my compressed shock length. Again, I've marked that position. So now we can see then that the change from this position to this position would be effective travel. And I am measuring that to be 230 millimeters, which is a little bit more than 9 inches. So for my particular shock, as we measure it off the shock itself, that will be the effective travel that I can get out of this shock absorber. Now, what would happen if we were to angle the shock? There is the vertical position, and now we start angling it. Well, the more we angle it, the less effective the damping rate will be. Doesn't matter whether we angle it sideways or fore and aft, that will still hold true. If this was a coilover, the spring rate would also reduce as the angle increases. Here's some numbers. So if the angle is at 10 degrees, we have 98% effective, and so it moves down 20 degrees, 92%, 30 degrees, 86%, 40 degrees, 74%. How true these numbers are, I don't really know. I dug this out a long time ago. I found it on the internet. I can't exactly remember where. But nevertheless, common sense dictates that something like this would be what happens here. And as you can see, it's not the change in the effective damping rate is not as radical as one would think. So at 20 degrees, we're still 92% effective. So yes, the disadvantage then of angling the shock, less effective. But there is an advantage as well. Let's see if we can figure that out and discover what's going to happen. So the shock is vertical. Let's change it to 20 degrees, just to pick a random number. So I'm going to mount the shock now, mount my wooden stick now, at an angle of 20 degrees. So the bottom mounting position remains the same on my extended shock length, but I'm swinging it through 20 degrees, and I'm going to be creating a new mounting point right there. Right, now if we bring this compressed shock length into play, we obviously have to attach it to the same mounting position up there. But what's happening here? The travel movement is still vertical, so it would make sense then that the arc of this point, where this arc intersects the vertical line, this is where we'll end up when the shock is fully compressed. And maybe you can already see what's starting to happen right here. Let me just scribe a mark here on the board so we can see and measure what's happening. Now, I don't think that's very visible, so I'm just going to use my permanent marker so we can see it better. Let me just zoom in here. Okay, so the new intersection point is right there. So let me just move this out of the way. If I measure the distance between these 2 points, I get pretty much 25 millimeters or 1 inch. So what does it mean? Let me just move this stick out of the way. So this point is my original travel range when the shock was mounted vertically, but now because I angled the shock, my effective travel range has increased from the original 230 millimeters to a new 255 millimeters. I've gained 25 millimeters of travel range by angling the shock. How cool is that? So obviously the more you angle the shock, the more you will increase the travel range. So that's one big advantage of angling the shock absorber. You will increase effective travel range. And that's actually what I want, because I felt my travel range was a little bit on the small side or the short side. But by gaining another 25 mil, 1 inch, it gives me some extra in hand, and I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to be mounting my shocks at 20 degrees. I'm not losing much in effectiveness as far as damping rate is concerned, but I'm gaining an extra 1 inch of travel range. So to do a quick recap then, my effective axle travel is a little bit less than 8 inches. The shock that I'm going to use here, when I mount it vertically, it's got a travel range of a little bit more than 9 inches. But by angling my shock, I'm improving, or increasing rather, the effective travel range of my shock to a little bit more than 10 inches. That gives me about 2 inches more than what I require. So I've got a bit of a safety in hand there. So it's going to work out well for me now. So yes, enough of theory. Let's start making some stuff. I'm going to start by making some brackets for the bottom shock mount. So yeah, I've cut myself a little plywood template. What else, eh? I like my plywood bits. So now I'm going to have my bottom shock mount something like that. I'm going to go make 2 of these. Actually no, I need 4 of them. It's just easier to drill this hole before I cut out the bracket. Then it's not the struggle to hold the part when you want to drill the hole. And it gives a good means to hold my template in place for cutting it out. The bolt helps me to hold the 2 brackets together. Now I can clean them up as one, then I know they're the same. Just doing a test run here, I had to give a little bit of extra clearance there to allow for the angle. But yeah, otherwise I think it's looking pretty good. This is a 1/4 inch 6mm plate. So let's go try this thing on the back axle. Something like this. I wanted to drop that bottom mount a little bit below the axle, otherwise the shock sticks out too far above the frame. I've got a bit of clearance here. It's not much, but it doesn't matter because when the axle moves up, the shock angle changes and it actually moves forward, so it increases that clearance. And then obviously the bag diameter also increases when the bag deflates. But I think we'll be fine. I reckon I must tack it on here and then we can see how it works out. Yeah, so it's never simple. I had to take the wheel off so I can get in here and see what I'm doing. So I've removed my shock and I've bolted this together using the shock bush. And I also inserted a little spacer there, piece of like 1mm thick aluminum, just to create a bit of a gap. So now I'm going to tack this on here and then hopefully it will be good. We'll find out soon enough. Let's see, something like that. Let's give this a try. Okay, let's get the shock in here so we can just make sure that it's going to work before I weld it fully. Get this bolt out. So this should just slip in there now. And it does. And let's just get that bolt in there. There we go. And I think that's going to work well. I just want to make sure that my clearances and everything is good. So I've put the wheel back on. let's slam the truck and just make sure that everything is going to be sweet. Yes, fantastic. Nothing is going to catch or fall anyway. I like it. Right, so I'm fully aired up, and this is where the top of my extended shock is sitting. Now, I'm not going to make my bracket based on this. I'm rather going to slam the truck again and then use my compressed shock template to do this. So I've got my compressed shock length template in here. I'm fully slammed, the frame is lying on the floor, so there's no ways that we can go lower than this. So I'm going to use this as a guide to make my top bracket. I'll end up making a plywood hardboard template again, and I think I'll add just a tiny little bit, maybe 10 more to the length, just to be safe. Okay, so I'm going to put my piece of plywood in like this. I think I'm going to move this away just a little bit to provide some clearance. And then I can mark this here and that hole. And then I'm going to move that hole up. I think a 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters is enough. Let's get this line as well. Alright, let's go cut something out and see how it works. So I'm going to move the center of my hole up a 1/4 inch, 6 millimeter to that position there. Then I'm going to mark a circle or a semicircle here. Something like that, and we'll take this one right down to there, and I would imagine the same this way. Let's just make that radius a little bit more, and go down to that point there. Something like that. Let's see how it works out. I'm going to cut it out. Let me just drill this bolt hole first. Let's go see how it works. Of course, the beauty of making it first in plywood is if it doesn't work out, you can easily make another one. So the steel version of this fellow will then weld on here, and then we've got an upper shock mount. Of course, at the moment the bolt won't go through because I've moved that hole up a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters. Yeah, and of course there will be 2 of these. I think I'm going to actually air up the truck now and stick in the extended length shock just to confirm everything and make sure that we're clearing and everything is good before I make them. And up she goes so that we can get the real McCoy shock in there. So fully aired up, my shock is in place and my bracket doesn't fit. No, I'm lying. This is exactly what I want. Ah, there's no picking bush in here. Let me just stick a bush in. Get the bush into the rubber here. And try again. That's better. So yes, to get it to fit, I need to actually compress the shock. But that's exactly what I want. So that means that I've got a little bit of spare on the bottom end as well, if you know what I mean, which is exactly what I was aiming for. So yes, I'm happy, except there's one small problem. The shock is currently touching this cross member, so I actually need to make this, add a little bit to the bracket there, just so that it can move that way a little bit more. I think I need to add about 10 millimeters, 3/8 of an inch at most, and then we'll set there. Yes, looks good. I think it's going to work fine. That's pretty much how much, shall we call it, reserve travel I had towards the other side, which is what, roughly, well, maybe 1.5 inches, more than that, maybe 1.75 inches, 2 inches, something in that region. So the beauty of the wooden templates is that it's so easy to just quickly make another one if you need to adapt it. And then you will know that the one you make in steel is spot on. Now if I can just get this one out of here. So I just need to add about 10 millimeters or 3/8 of an inch here. And then we will be good. So I'm just going to cut out my new version. I need to extend this with about 50 millimeters as well. Just right to there. Okay, let's try the new version. Get this fella to go in, yeah. And compress it. And I've got plenty clearance now. Yes, I think this is the version. I'm happy with it. Now it's going to work. I can go make these in steel now. So being a stingy old fart that never throws anything away, I scratched out these 5mm plate offcuts, and I'm going to make my brackets from them. See how I can fit it in. Yeah, 5mm is 3/16 to my American friends. I think that's more than enough. I want to cut out my brackets using the template as a guide with the plasma cutter like this. But if I leave the template its original size, my bracket will be larger by about half the diameter of the nozzle here. So if I do want to have the final brackets that I cut out the same size as my template, I need to cut my template smaller by about half that diameter. In my case it's 3mm or 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to cut 1/8 of an inch all the way around, reduce the size of my template, and then my final brackets will be the same size as my template. Does that make sense? Some of you guys know this story already, but for the benefit of those who don't. So I drilled a hole for my bolt first, So now I can use the bolt to hold my template in place for me while I cut it out. A little bit of forward thinking. That would be the last S in SOS mode. You don't know what SOS mode is? That's the stage of my life that I'm in now, man. SOS stands for slower, older, but also a little smarter. My magical pipe cutting knife is also very good for slicing biltong. Now biltong is a very South African thing. It's similar to jerky, but we make it quite differently. And I tell you, it tastes much better than jerky. I promise you. So essentially, we marinate the raw meat for some time in vinegar. Then we spice it. And the big secret of good biltong is in the spices. And then we hang it up and air dry it for 3 to 5 days. So it's not cooked at all. It's basically raw air dried meat. We make it from beef. The best biltong is made from game. And I tell you, all South Africans are addicted to this stuff. This particular piece is made from the meat of a springbok. Springbok in Afrikaans, and if you translate that directly, it would mean a jump buck. My brother-in-law Andrew went hunting in the Karoo not so long ago, and he gave me some. So thanks, brother. Biltong, I tell you, I can eat it all day. The stuff's the best, man. You should give it a try. There's so many expats, South African expats, all over the world these days. I'm sure I'll be able to find biltong somewhere. Hey, and if you're a vegetarian, you're probably thinking, those savages in Africa eating wild animals. And you must be now hitting the unsubscribe button. I'm sorry, dude. This is who we are. Let's assemble this business with my new plates and see what we get. So I've made a spacer here from a nut. I just drilled it out because I need to space these little tabs a little distance from the part away to clear the shock body here. And then let's get this nut on here. Alright, so now I've just got to decide in this orientation where to attach my bracket, and then obviously it will sit like that. So looking from behind, I'm going to set the shock completely vertical. There's no need to angle it. So I'm just going to make a mark right here. That's where this bracket needs to attach. And I'm going to take this business apart again so I can weld these two tabs on here. I've taken the shock out. So there's the shock bush. I've got my two spacers. I inserted a little shim there that I made from a piece of 1mm aluminium plate just to give a bit of clearance. So I must just put it on my mark now. Then I can tack it on. And we can see how this business works out. Now shall I do the one on the other side as well? Nah, let's just test drive this one first and see that everything is good. Right, I've got that shock bolted in place. I've got good clearances everywhere. I'm fully aired up at the moment. Let's slam it and see what we get. Let's just have a look here. The bag is just barely touching the plastic cover on the shock. But I don't think that's a problem. This only happens when I'm in a slam position. It's not like it's going to chafe or anything. Up here, clearances and everything look good. Same down there. Yes, I think we're there. I can weld this one fully up and do the one on the other side as well. Let's jack it up one more time. Yes, man, everything is looking sweet. So this one is stacked on as well, but I think I'm just going to double check it all again. It's just safer that way. It's much easier to break a tack than it would be to cut off the whole fully welded bracket and redo it. So let's just slam it again. It looks all good to me. Yes, I'm happy. So I'm going to get my air controller out of the way. And then I can disconnect all these air lines, take the shocks out and weld my brackets fully. Yeah, so I'm really not interested in maneuvering my old bones in here and doing upside down welding. So I'll just put in a little bit of extra welding here, and when I take the diff out, down the line I weld it up fully. I covered my airbag with a wet rag just in case we get a hot ball of steel deciding to go the wrong way. And I'm now going to weld my tabs on the outside first, and that will actually pull it open slightly, which is cool by me. Then the shock will fit and the bolt will tighten it up. If I weld it on the inside first, the distortion will cause the brackets to close up, and then the shock won't fit. Business from this angle, it does seem that these shocks are too close together, but yeah, first of all, I can't mount them here. The mounting bracket for my link bars is in the way, and amazingly enough, this distance apart is actually a little bit more than what the original Isuzu had. And I'm just looking at this, and the way I figured it, if this tire should hit a bump, as far as damping goes, we're going to be creating a lever between the shock mounting position and the contact pads on this tire. So that will be the fulcrum of this lever, if you understand what I'm saying. And that's quite long. This back axle is actually quite a bit wider than the original Isuzu. So yeah, I think we'll be good. I'm happy with this. Okay, lekker man. My shock mounts are done. Can tick that off the list. If you're new here, you know what lekker means. It's a South African slang word for cool or nice or great. So let's see, you know, I'm almost done with fabrication on my frame. I still want to tie these two vertical ends together here, and then I need to decide how to end my truck, if you know what I mean. But to do that, I would like to stick the cab back on and the bodywork, so I can stand back and just have a look at the aesthetics of it all, and how it's all going to tie together. But you know what? It's cold up here. I still haven't got a heater in my shop. I know there's a nice warm fire down by the house, so I think I'm going to go enjoy my wife. Thanks for hanging out with me out here in the shop. I enjoyed your company. I'll see you in the next video when we carry on with this business. Until then, have a lekker one.